Well, hello, my name is Jim Royal. I'm a huge Beatles and Elvis Presley fan and basically classic rock in general, so if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. If you could do a thumbs up, that's always most appreciated. And feel free to leave comments. I always enjoy reading them and I do my best to try to respond in a timely manner. Today what I wanted to do is I wanted to review an album from Ringo Starr called Old Wave. It's his 9th solo studio album and it was originally released in June of 1983. This is an album that was produced by Joe Walsh. Joe Walsh was from the Eagles and the James Gang. Very accomplished musician and guitarist in its own right. And Ringo decided to call it Old Wave. It was kind of a funny kind of jab at the new music called New Wave. New Wave were groups like Duran Duran, A Flock of Seagulls, Berlin, things like that. And he was basically saying, no, we're old wave, we're rock and roll. I like it. I really like this album. I remember when this album came out, I had seen it in the record bins at the mall. I looked at it. It was an import, meaning it wasn't released here in the United States. And it cost more, so I didn't really have the funds for it. I didn't really know too much about it. I was concerned thinking, well, it wasn't released here in the States. How good of an album could it have been? In fact, where it was released in Canada, like this particular release I'm holding in my hands. It was released in Mexico, South America. It was released in Germany. It was released in Australia, among other countries. But it wasn't released in the States or England. He had a record deal here in the States with Boardwalk Records. And that they had released his prior album, Stop and Smell the Roses. However, the founder of that label died in 1982, named Neil Bogart. Unfortunately, the record label folded soon after that, and Ringo didn't have a contract. So he wanted to get it out anyway, and he did. It took a little bit longer. This album was recorded from February 1982 through about the summer of 1982, and a lot of it was recorded March and April, the basic tracks, and a lot of the vocals at that time. So let me show you this. This is the Canadian release. I'm very, very, very happy to have this, by the way. Very happy. And yeah, look at that. It has the hole, the cutout there, and it's turning yellow, but it's 40 years old. So the first side, RCA Victor. And then we've got the B side. There are 10 songs featured on this, and I'm going to go through each of these songs for you. Okay. Let's take a look at the CD. The CD finally came out on CD in 1994 on the Right Stuff Records. And this is Collector's Edition. I love the hype sticker. Collector's Edition, first time on CD, includes liner notes, unreleased tracks, and rare photos. And you know that it's from the time period because by this point, 93, they did away with jewel boxes, or I'm sorry, long boxes that would house it. This is a jewel box here, but what they did is they put a seal on there, special seal to show you, yeah, this has not been tampered with, nobody's taken the disc out. Later on they would put them in shucks. You'd see those protective cases because they did away with the long box. And I actually have an open copy of this. Really good liner notes and pictures and stuff. Joe Walsh, Ringo Starr, and other people that were featured on the album, and Barbara Bach, his wife. Okay, this is a Record Store Day release that came out pretty recently, at Black Friday. I think it was last year. And I love the Obi strip on there. It features a bonus track like that CD, the long version As Far As We Can Go. Which is an early version of one of the songs on this, which I'll talk about in a moment. Here's the CD from Record Store Day. and this is the original CD that came out in '94. Okay. Alright, the first song is called In My Car. So, how this all came about, it was February of 1982 when, it was a little bit around, maybe a little bit before, but February 1982, Ringo called Joe Walsh. He remembered Joe Walsh from the days of LA when, he would be wild and crazy with John Lennon and Keith Moon and, Harry Nilsson and other people like that, hanging out in LA in the nightclubs and stuff. He called him and asked him, hey, I'm producing a new album. Making a new album, would you like to produce it for me? And he said, absolutely, sure. So he flew to England in Tittenhurst Park, which is where Ringo was living. And if you remember that name, that was the same home that John Lennon had owned when he was recording Imagine, 1971's Imagine. By 1973, John moved to New York and he sold the home to Ringo. Ringo had the studios there, and he renamed the studios Startling Studios, and he also had a publishing company too. So Joe comes, then he brings his equipment, they write some songs, they get an idea of how they're going to structure the album, and one of the things they talked about is they wanted to try to have an album that a lot of times he would bring in producers, and they would be very slick, and they would have their own production, and Ringo would be the featured player on his album. In this case, they tried to make it feel more like Ringo. Well, I got to tell you, to me, this sounds like maybe a Joe Walsh album, which definitely isn't a bad thing. You can hear Joe Walsh all over this. Joe Walsh is a very good guitarist, one of the best. You can hear his lead on here and his playing, and his backing vocals are throughout all of this. Besides him, what they did, which I think was good, is they had a few principal players, as session players, that played through most of the album and on the songs. And I thought it worked really well because it had a similar sound throughout all, and that was good too. So besides Ringo playing drums, vocals, and percussion, Joe Walsh did guitars, backing vocals. Mo Foster was brought in to play bass. He was a session player that had worked with Eric Clapton. And then we had Gary Brooker and Chris Stanton play keyboards. Stanton had also played with Clapton. If you remember Gary Brooker, he was the lead vocalist for Procol Harum. Chris Stanton had been playing keyboards at one time for Joe Cocker's Grease Band. So he had a great bunch of guys. Joe Walsh also brought his production team, his engineer, Jim Nipper. So that was the core of this. The first song on this album is called In My Car, and it was written by Joe, Ringo, Mo Foster, and Kim Goody. So the gang were told to bring in songs, to bring in cover tunes in case if they didn't have enough new original material. So Mo, the bassist, brought this song in that he had written originally with Kim Goody. Joe liked it and Ringo liked it, but Joe said, you know what, I want to change it around, I want to recreate the song. So they rewrote it, and it's a really good tune. It ended up being the first single off the album. I think it's a very strong song. I like it. It's talking about, I think it's just, maybe just, it can be interpreted as this. It can be interpreted as not just, hey, let's go for a joyride in my car and don't be a backseat driver. It's also, it could be interpreted, hey, let's have a good time in life. Hang out, let's have a good time, let's go out tonight, and don't take things so seriously. That's how I look at the song. It's very simple. It's got some really nice guitar signature tunes of Joe all over it. You've got Joe in the background singing, In My Car. I like it. It's a fun tune. You put it on, you listen to it, and you're like, wow, what a great pick-me-up song, right? All right, the next song is called Hopeless. Hopeless is a good tune written by Joe and Richard, one of their new songs. Richard Starkey is Ringo Starr. I like it. It is another good tune that easily could have wound up on a Joe Walsh tune, Joe Walsh album. I like His guitar sound on here, I like his slide, and it is just it's another strong album track. At the end, which is interesting, as the song is starting to fade, they have done this with some of this. They have a keyboard that is then just playing. So you hear the keyboard in the background, and as the song fades, the keyboard just keeps playing and then it fades on its own. And I thought that was pretty interesting, and it was just a little different thing. I like it. Hopeless is basically saying, well, you know, when the whole world is coming down and just things look like they're so bad, hey, I'm doing well anyway. And he's talking about aliens and UFOs in the lyrics, and a lot of satire, a lot of fun. I like it. I like it. It's, again, you know, this album, you're listening to it and you still got a high as you're going up listening to it. The next song is called Alibi. Okay, Alibi was written by Joe and Ringo. This is a song that basically, I think he's talking about before he got married to Barbara the prior year. He would have to come up with an alibi. You know, he'd get into trouble, maybe with, you know, his prior wife or girlfriend Nancy or Maureen, I'm not sure. But he'd have to come up with an alibi, an excuse as to, oh no, I was really over here when this happened, so no, I couldn't have done it. Looking for an alibi, and now that he's with Barbara, how I interpret the song, he doesn't have to have an alibi anymore, and everything is just great. This is really cool too. Again, more Joe Walsh signature guitar playing. I love the lead on here, and again, it's just done really well. You know, you can tell that, yeah, it was simply produced, but they took time on it, and they put a lot into it, but it wasn't overproduced. And it just has a good feel. The whole album has a good feel, sounding very similar, and that's what I like about it too. Be My Baby is song 4. This was a solo Joe Walsh written song. Joe Walsh brought it to the sessions, and it easily could have appeared on one of his albums. Be my baby, be my baby. And it is fun, and you hear Joe all over it, and it's done very well with his slide. I like it a lot. It's definitely a really strong song. Song number 5 is the first cover tune. It's called She's About a Mover. If you know the Coasters' 1957 hit called Searchin', they supposedly said this was a rewrite of this. The Sir Douglas Quintet, they recorded this song, She's About to Move Her, in 1965, but people said it sounds a lot like Searchin'. I don't know. You be the judge on that. If you've heard the Beatles at Decca sessions, this is one of the songs, Searchin' anyway, they covered. But She's a Mover is a really good song, and apparently Ringo liked it a lot. This is a party song. There's a lot of guitar players and other musicians on it, trombone, saxophone. In fact, they call themselves the Hollywood Rock and Roll Review. You have Sam Clayton, Bruce McPherson, Peter Burnett on there. You've got Jaco Marcelino, Garrett Atkins, David Woodford, Lee Thornburg, just a lot of people. So you have different layers of musicians. You know, kind of like So Glad to See You Here, you know, from Paul and Wings, from Back to the Egg. Just a bunch of people. It's a real party song, real party anthem. It's done really well. I think a lot of people, when they think about this album, they think of this song as one of the stronger songs. All right, the next song on here is called I Keep Forgetting. This is the Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller song from 1962. I think Chuck Jackson recorded this one, if I'm not mistaken, and it was popular at that time. It's a nice song. I like it a lot. It features a talk box on it, which is something that is hooked, a tube connected from the microphone of Ringo down to, I believe, a guitar amp, and you know, you talk through that. It's very interesting. Aerosmith has used it. If you know Peter Frampton, his Frampton Comes Alive, this talk box is featured all over it. Gives it the effects to the vocals. It's done very well. What I like too is Ringo makes it its own. Initially when I heard the song, I knew the song. I keep forgetting you don't want me no more. I keep forgetting you don't want me no more. I was like, yeah, I've heard the song. But you know what? He does a great job with it. And that's what I like. That's what I like about this album. This album is still riding high for me. And, we're up through song 6. At the end, he's got some backwards, guitar solos from Joe, which are interesting. And it just keeps everything steady and fun. All right, the next song is called Picture Show Life. This is written by John Reed and John Slate. I think this is an original that was brought to the sessions. I like it. It's talking about basically the rock star Hollywood life, in that world, and glitter and gold, and how everything is just fine for you as, a superstar. It's a picture show life. It couldn't get any better, even though around you maybe not everything is good. I like it. It kind of reminds me of like maybe a Carl Perkins type song, but it's not rockabilly though. It's for the time. It's very much 1980s. It's got that sound, but it's not indulged with it too much. It's a rock album too, so keeping that in mind. So now we're up to song number 8. So this is an interesting one. It has an interesting history. As Far as We Can Go by Russ Ballard. He wrote it. It was originally recorded in 1978. Ringo had worked on some sessions with Russ at the time. Unfortunately, Russ's dad had passed away, and after working on 4 or 5 songs and having at least this one recorded, he just said, his heart wasn't into it at the time, so Russ bowed out gracefully. Ringo liked the song. It has the original version, which is on the CD and the Record Store Day releases. Actually goes on for 5.5 minutes, has a nice orchestra, have nice piano, done very well, and an excellent vocal by Ringo. In fact, Ringo liked it so much, it was one of those songs that he brought to the sessions. He brought the reel, and he wanted something made of it. The other thing with I Keep Forgetting, that's another song that Ringo brought to the sessions. He liked it as a cover tune, but this one, was for Ringo, As Far as We Can Go. So what Joe did, he listened to it, and it sounds different. Like I said, there's uniformity through on this album, and it was like, well, is this song going to fit? What Joe decided to do was cut one of the verses. He trimmed it down to just under 4 minutes. He recreated the total backing track on it, and they have a different drummer playing drums on it, and they actually had to go by Ringo's vocal to get the tune, the timing and everything right. I like the song a lot. It's the ballad on the album. Okay, I've said a lot of times with Ringo, it's fun in games with Ringo a lot of times. This song is serious. As Far as We Can Go, it talks about basically the end of a relationship. I thought it is very heartfelt. I think, Ringo, like I said, really liked the vocals, and he wanted to make sure that hopefully this song would be put on the album. They did a really nice job with it. All right, the next 2 songs, as far as I'm concerned, are pretty much jams in the studio, but they're done well. They're not just throwaways, like Ringo's Can't Fight Lightning, if you've heard that song that was unreleased. It's okay. This one looks like they took a little time, but Everyone's in a Hurry But Me, this was interesting. So they had some famous musicians drop in on the sessions and decided to be a part of them. You had John Entwistle, who actually gets a writing credit on here too. He is the bassist, was the bassist for The Who. He dropped by and he played on it. Eric Clapton played on it. Oh my gosh, right? Eric Clapton played some guitar and lead on there and gets a writer credit. Chris Stanton, as I mentioned, is on there, and he had done some work. Him and Mo, I think, had done some work as session players with Eric, so they felt all at home. It's a good tune. There's very little vocal to it, but it's a fun number. All right, the last song is called Going Down. This is Joe Walsh and Ringo Starr. Great tune. I like it. It's a nice way to end the album. It's another jam, and it keeps, the fun going throughout it all. How would I rate this album from a 1 to 10, 10 being the best? I would give it an 8. I think it's that strong. I think it's an excellent album. I was really fooled. I hadn't heard this album till last year, so it just goes to show, don't always believe critics. But give this album a chance. It's a nice period piece, and it's a really nice album. Thank you for watching my video, and you have a great day. Take care. Bye.